Thanks. So I'm going to talk about Magento done right. Woo! Or can it ever be done right? Hopefully. I said I'm Ciaran Rooney. I work at Swoon Editions. We sell furniture online. And we've been doing that for quite a while. And as he's already mentioned, I used to work at Skimlinks, which is a big ad tech company based here. Some of you might have heard. I worked with them from the very beginning up until they got really big. And recently I was at Busu, which is a language learning app. Kind of helped them turn around all their apps and stuff there. And I also work with Seedcamp as a mentor, really great accelerator based here in London and all across Europe. And I help mentor their early stage companies. And I've run PHP UK for quite a few years before a year ago, 2 years ago, I stopped doing it. That's my things. You can contact me, you can tweet me, email me, whatever. Hi, yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Magento Past, what we did wrong. That's the biggest section. Present, so kind of how we fixed all of that, and what the state of Magento looks like right now, and a little bit about the future. So where is Magento going, and a little bit about Magento 2. So Magento Past. So Magento came out of an agency called Varian. Varian was founded in 2001. And they were mostly using OS Commerce. And they found OS Commerce really restrictive, and so they said, we're going to fork it, and we're going to make something new. And it's going to be called Bento. And then they really looked into OS Commerce and found it was really bad. So they said, no, let's just write it from scratch. So they wrote a new e-commerce system from scratch, and in August 31st, 2007, they released a beta to the public. And then they found out there was something else called Bento. So they renamed it, and they named it Magento. And the term mage apparently comes from Dungeons and Dragons. It means a wizard. And if you ever wondered why Magento sometimes seems a bit magic, I think this explains it. And also, so the reason for the weird logo, the Magento logo is supposed to be inspired from the Dragon Lace logo. I guess it explains the colors, but I don't know where else that's going from, but that is the lore. So Magento 1.0 came out March 31st, 2008. If we look at our past, so we were founded in 2012. We had just one product. It was just a chair. And we used to sell it online, and we used a community edition of Magento. And we had an agency build it. I'm not sure who, because we've worked with a couple over the years. And they did it in about 2 weeks, and it was really quick, and it looked like this. And it worked, and people could buy the chair. And Debbie and Brian, who founded the company, they didn't really know that much about e-commerce or development. They weren't developers. They didn't have a developer background. So the agency built them the site. They gave them a zip file and said, good luck, off you go, and have fun with your website. So the first thing they had to do was find a hosting company to put it on. So they Googled Magento hosting, and they found someone that looked a bit like this. And it seemed like a good deal. So they said, $2, like, how can you go wrong? And they asked the agency, what do we do? And they're like, yeah, just take the zip file, put it on the host, and you're done. And if you need to change anything, we'll just FTP into the box, and we'll edit the files, and then we'll update it, and everything will be fine. And that seemed, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And then one day this happened. The hard drive from this little hosting company in the middle of nowhere just failed. And they didn't think they could recover the hard drive. And the person who was in charge of the website at that time did this. I don't know if you could see, they're sleeping under a desk in the back of the office. And they just kind of hoped it would all go away and get better. It did, eventually. It took a day and a half, but we did come back online. But if any of you are still just creating a zip of Magento, of your code, of any code, just putting it on a server, you're basically just sleeping under a table and closing your ears and hoping it'll all get better. So we had to do something better. So we'll come to the present. 2010, eBay bought Magento. Well, they bought 49% of it, and then later on that year, they bought the rest of it. And the founders left, and everything kind of stalled for a little bit. So the people at eBay were like, this can't go on. And they broke up eBay and broke it up into lots of little bits. And eventually, they sold it. So Primera bought it. And technically, on the 3rd of November last year, 2015. And they rebranded from, it was still called Varian, and they rebranded it to Magento Inc. And it's doing okay now. They've launched Magento 2, just about 2-3 weeks after that. And it's now the #1 e-commerce platform for the Alexa Top 100. They've got about 250,000 people using it around the world. There's over 70,000 certified Magento developers. And they estimate that $50 billion was done last year through the Magento platform. So it's not kind of the small little platform people still think of it. What do we look like now? So we still sell furniture, but we got more like 4,000 products now instead of one. And we're running Magento Enterprise Edition. And we do things a little bit better. So we rebranded the site in about 3 weeks early this year. And we were able to do that because of some of the changes we've made over the past 2-3 years. We have kind of lots of complicated products, made-to-order products. We do partnerships with designers. We launch new products every day. We've got lots of separate business units that we need to report on. We've got like a mattress business unit. And we don't FTP to our servers anymore. So how does our development look like to get here? So if you take development, you break it down, you've basically got 4 things to it. You've got code, which is like your modules, your themes, everything you do it. You have how you build that code, and you make it ready to go. And when I was looking for this icon, it really reminded me of something. It reminded me of that. Does everyone know what that is? It's a double-ended hammer, and it comes from a blog post called PHP, a fractal of bad design. But what that blog post essentially gets to is that, yes, PHP is maybe a little bit badly designed, but most of the problems people have with it is tooling. And they use bad tools. It's a bad tool. So we're going to try and talk about some good tools as we go through it. So we have code, we have build, we test our code, and then we deploy it. And deploying is really getting it on the server. It doesn't necessarily mean going live. You can use feature switches, and you can use a lot of different things for that. So it's primarily getting it on the server. And that's a really helpful calendar notification. So getting there, it's not easy. It looks a little bit like this. So at the beginning, we FTP'd to the server. So complexity was pretty low, didn't take very much time. As we were moving through it, when we got to about here, everyone was like, this is a huge pain, I can deal with it. But it's really annoying. As it got even more complex, everyone was like, fuck this, I just want to go back. Like, this is difficult. It takes way too much time. Can't we just do it? Can't we just put files on the server again? But after that, it becomes amazing. So it'll take a while to change your development methodologies to make them better, but it's definitely worth it. So we start with the code. And the first thing we changed was using Composer. And so hopefully everybody knows what Composer is. If not, Jordy is doing an amazing keynote this afternoon. He'll be talking a little bit about it, and there's a bunch of other talks, I imagine, covering it as well. Jordy's the guy who wrote Composer. So the first library we took was Composer Installer, and that enables you to install Magento modules with Composer and automatically integrate them into the installation. The next one you need is Composer Autoloader. And what that does is it hijacks your Magento autoloader. So your Magento autoloader loads the whole Magento application. You can hijack that and put the Composer autoloader into it, so then all your Composer libraries get loaded in as well. And then once you've got all your modules loading in through Composer, you're probably going to want to load Magento Core as well. So there's a core installer for Magento. This is built by a guy called Adian at JH, and I think I see some JH people in the back of the room. What this does is just kind of really streamlines your way. It lets you work with a bunch of other libraries that you can load in from Packagist and from GitHub and use them as part of your Magento install and have a really slick deployment process. On the theme, we use a bunch of other stuff as well. So we use Grunt to build all our front-end assets. Just use, if you haven't used Grunt before, just install Grunt. We keep our theme completely separate, so it runs in its own repo. And we use React to build components on our theme. So React components are really self-contained. It lets you create little reusable components that you can reuse. You can combine the components. You can nest them, all sorts of stuff like that. And then we also use something called Babel, which lets you write in ES6, ECMAScript 6, which is the latest version of JavaScript. And use that together with React's JSX to being able to mix in ES6 and HTML in the same files. So it's a special file format for React. You can still use regular JavaScript, but you can kind of try out this syntax, and it lets you write a lot quicker on what you want to do. If you're going to use React, there's a Chrome extension for it that is really useful. It makes debugging your app much easier because React does a lot of magic behind the scenes and you can't really see what's going on in the DOM. The Chrome extension lets you browse the tree, see exactly what the DOM is being manipulated. So you should try that out as well. And we use a Roku. So when we build all our assets out, so all our CSS, all our JavaScript, we stub the Magento theme in PHP files. And then we mock the JavaScript endpoints in JSON. And we create that as its own package, so it becomes a Composer dependency of our overall Magento install, but by itself it's also deployable. So we deploy that theme to Heroku, and it lets us get feedback really quickly from all of our stakeholders, whether they're internal stakeholders, external if we're doing stuff with third parties, if we're doing partnerships, we can deploy it on there. Or when you're doing a rebrand in 3 weeks, you can build it all there and go through some really fast iteration styles. So this is kind of what our mocked up version looks like. It lets us also mock up everything in all states. Kind of when you're doing any kind of web application, it becomes very easy to forget about your edge cases and your error states, or what happens when people put words into phone number boxes and stuff like that. So it lets you stub all those unusual states and then just make sure that you've got them all covered. So that's really helpful. We then come on to the build. So we've used a really amazing build tool called Circle CI. It's basically a continuous integration and deployment tool. It's quite similar to Jenkins or Hudson or any of those kind of tools, but it's completely SaaS provider. It's used by Shopify, which is probably one of the biggest e-commerce SaaS platforms out there as well. So it connects to your GitHub, and it completely automates your builds for you. You define what your build is in a YAML file. And in that, you're basically putting in simple bash commands. I mean, you can use Chef, or you can use other recipes, or you can just write simple bash commands in there, and it will, excuse me, build for you. And run your tests, which we'll come to in a second. And there's a really great integration guide on there. So what that does, it builds a zip, and it will put it where you need to. And as part of the zipping process, you can also collapse all your symlinks. So if you've been putting your theme files in separate directories and stuff, if you've got your vendor directory with a bunch of modules in it, your zip process can collapse all of that and put all your files where they need to be for Magento to find them. Also integrates really nicely with Slack and lets us know when our builds are failing, when they're passing, and lets us know if we've got too many running. People cancel them all the time. And it's free as well, which is really good for if you're just running one job at a time, which is why we get a lot of cancelled. So testing. Testing is important. You should test your stuff. We use Codeception to run all our tests. Circle runs the Codeception tests. Also, because we're using Enterprise Magento, we've got some unit tests supplied by Magento, not very many. But we do all our acceptance and unit tests through Codeception. With our acceptance tests, we can mock them with Phantom.js. And we run actually our acceptance tests on the mocked version, the Roku version of the app, rather than the full Magento one. We also download, I think I had some bullet points, a fresh copy of the database each time that is kind of specially set up with all the different edge cases as well that we need to test for. You get a fresh environment each time on Circle, so it brings up a new instance, installs your code, runs your unit tests, and then packages it up for you. Why have I got that there? Oh, ecomdev is a collection of unit tests specifically for e-commerce that is really helpful as well. So if you're running e-commerce or a Magento install, take a look at them. And then we deploy it. So we got a new hosting company. The last one with the GIF we didn't think was up to it anymore. So we use a company called Elastera. They're based here in London. And they're a specialized Magento hosting company. They do a bunch of stuff out of the box for you. So they run on AWS, and they do all your auto scaling for you. They set up your CloudFront, they set up pushing your static assets to S3, they do your load balancing, they'll do multi-region or multi-AZ, they'll manage your database for you. It's all quite nice. It's a lot of things that it takes a lot of time to do. I've done it a lot before, and having someone who can just come in and do it for you for little more than the cost of AWS natively is really good. They also provide 24/7 monitoring, support, alerting. They have people on call. And it's probably the number one thing that allows me to sleep at night now, knowing that someone else has to wake up. Yeah. So Elastera also integrate with Slack and Hubot to do our deploys, and they also have Varnish. So Magento 1 doesn't natively support Varnish, but you can use Turpentine to integrate Varnish and have a HA proxy there. And they also enable full-page caching for Community Edition of Enterprise. Full-page caching is an enterprise-only feature, but they have a module that can enable that for you as well. And yeah, what is that? Slack again. This is our deploys going out, and Elasticsearch giving us notifications. So 2 different channels. One of them was the Magento dev, where we see our tests passing and building. And then this is our deployment channel, where we can see the deployments actually successfully happened. And for our production deploys, we've put 1 manual step in. So for our staging environments, every passing build immediately gets pushed to a staging environment, which is really, really helpful, because you can literally deploy code just by creating a pull request. For production, we have 1 little step in where we ask hubot to deploy to live, because it's a really nice idea to have all passing green builds on master go directly to live. But sometimes maybe you're not ready for that code to go to production. Maybe there's an event, or there's a reason, or there's a time when it needs to go live. So we have to ask hubot. Hubot just deploys to production, so you just go, hubot, can you deploy master to production? And it says yes, and then you get your deployment message. Or if you ask it to do something else, it will say no. I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. And that's kind of how our present looks. That's how our deployment process works. That's how our build process works. And we're here now. So we're pretty happy. So I'm going to look a little bit into the future. Magento 2. When the guys set out to build Magento 2, they wanted to do all these things. So they wanted a modern tech stack. They wanted improved performance. They wanted better communications or customizations. They wanted high quality code. They wanted much easier install and upgrade paths. And they wanted a much easier way to get external integrations. But we kind of have all of that already. But they've gone and done it. So now Composer is native to Magento, so you can install Magento through Composer. All the modules are Composer modules, so they encourage 1 repo per module. And you can also pull in any other dependencies that you need through Composer as well. So Symfony components, Zen components, things like that. They also have native varnish support now, so you don't need to use Turpentine anymore. They also have apparently some unit tests now, which is good. So this kind of like checks off a lot of the stuff that we spent the past couple of years doing. So if you're doing a fresh project, use Magento 2, you're going to get a much better experience. But they've done more than that. So there's a new architecture. They've split Magento into basically 4 apps rather than 1. So they have 1 app for catalog management, 1 for product management, which may seem like the same thing, but catalog is kind of how the categories are organized and displayed. The products are the products themselves. They've got an order management one and a checkout. And if you're coming from Magento 1, this is really quite breaking, and is going to break most of your modules, and is going to break quite a lot of what you've already done. But you don't need to use this layout from the get-go. So you could just choose to replace part of your Magento with one of them. You could just choose to use the order management or use the product management parts of it. Or you can actually set a switch to not use this architecture at all and continue using a Magento 1-like architecture. But if you are going to migrate from Magento 1 to Magento 2, you're probably better off going for it from the get-go. It's going to let you scale your Magento a lot easier because you can scale each of these components separately. So if you're running a really high volume site, you can give your checkout a lot more resources, and you can cache the hell out of your catalog and your product management areas. And you can do that way easier than you ever could in Magento 1. So it's still worth looking at it if you're doing a migration process. And you should probably treat it more like a fresh build. So rather than treating it as we're modernizing a legacy app, if you think I'm building an app that looks very similar to the one I have, but I'm building it from scratch, And then you're going to find, as we did, that most of the work you've already done in the past, you don't need to actually port it. They've improved it in such ways that you can leave a lot of that behind you and use what's native in Magento now. They've also got Magento UI, so it's a new kind of framework for building the UI of Magento. It's built on less instead of Sass, which is a little bit annoying that they've decided to change when there's not a huge difference. But it's built on less. It's focused on web standards. It is customizable and really easy to maintain. It's quite nice, actually. And it's fully responsive, which is good because Magento 1 was not responsive, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time making it. So, and another thing that people don't really think about is it's accessible. So I think it's AA compliant accessibility, if you're familiar with the WAG compliance. So it puts in all the right markup for screen readers and for various different things as well. And what's really exciting about Magento UI, if you've ever worked with Magento frontend, is that it doesn't use prototype. Woo! Yay. So things will stop breaking. It comes with a blank theme. This is not a very good screenshot of it, which is a really useful resource if you've ever had to build a Magento theme before. So it kind of gives you all the right ways to lay everything out. It gives you a lot of base code there to start from, and is fairly blank, so it's quite easy jumping off point if you've never done one before. They've also hugely improved the admin. They've reorganized the menus around functions. Things are a lot easier to find. There's only 5 tabs now. Is that 5? 6. But they're much more clearly organized around function. The reporting is much better. So you can add columns, remove columns, you can drag and drop, you can sort. You can do all these things you kind of take for granted in a modern web app that weren't there in Magento 1. And for the first time, the admin is also responsive. So you can edit products, you can publish things, you can manage orders on your phone, which is really amazing. If you've been using Magento 1 for a long time, you'll know the pain of that. A couple of resources. So DevDocs is a community project, actually. And it's a bunch of documentation from Magento 2 written by technical writers. So it's not necessarily written by the developers, it's technical writers reviewing the functionalities, reviewing how the modules work, and it's really excellent, actually, compared to the almost zero documentation there was for Magento 1. It's quite complete. There's an agency here in Dublin London, called Session Digital, and they have a bunch of great tutorials for getting started. If you're Magento 2, if you're completely new to it, you should definitely check them out. And there is the ultimate guide to Magento 2 developer resources and lists of books and tutorials. This is an amazing blog post, and I got lots of help from it while doing this talk. It's got all sorts of links and resources and different things on it. So what does our Magento future look like? Could look like you. We're hiring. So we're hiring for front-end Magento developers, engineers, and PHP and Python engineers. We do a bunch of stuff outside of Magento. We manage ERP, we do demand prediction, we do marketing analysis, cohort analysis, and a bunch of other stuff. And we're hiring for a bunch of stuff. So if you're interested in an environment like this, come and see me. Any questions? It was a bit quick. It's only half an hour. But any questions?
Any questions? Magento users in the audience? Questions for 2?
Hey.
Questions for now?
Hi. Have you, because when you talked at the beginning about the fact that the hard drive filled up at the old hosting in the old scenario, was there anything done specifically to stop Magento filling your hard drive? For example, in our installs, we have to run crons to clear the logs, and because Magento logs so much rubbish that it does fill your hard drive. Is the solution that you now just have scalable hard drives and it's not a problem, or has something been done to rotate those logs?
Yeah, so we've done a bunch of stuff. The hard drive actually failed. It didn't fill up, which is much worse. If it filled up, we can just delete things. Failed, we didn't know if we'd get it back. But we do a bunch of stuff to maintain our logs. So we use Madron N98 is a command line tool for Magento. And it does lots of things like rotating your logs for you and stuff like that. And our hosting provider, Elastera, actually push it all into Logstash, Logly, so we can get it all remotely and search it and do a lot of really cool stuff like that.
Is there a question at the back there? Yep, Chanji.
Hey, since you mentioned that Magento 2 is effectively a rewrite, how are you selling that to the business?
Good question. So there's a number of different ways to sell a rewrite in. So we've got reduced complexity. We have got a lot of features that are going to be improved that we can sell in. We have lower cost of maintaining it going forward and lower cost of developing for it. I've got like the ability to actually attract more talent to the business. It's not kind of one thing where you go, it's Magento 2, we just have to do it. It's like a lot of little reasons that for all the different benefits you'll get. It's very similar to kind of selling in any rewrite, and then the developers are always really keen to do it. So that's never a difficult point anyway.
Actually, I kind of had a question along that lines. You seem to suggest, Ciaran, at one point some kind of hybrid Magento 2, Magento 1, and I did have a client last year ask questions on that line. It was early, I think, in the 2 release, that it could be one, all, or none of the new Magento core module implemented, and yet it's still a Magento 2 in some way. Would you mind expanding on that a little?
So if you were to actually do that, what you'd do is probably run them separately, and you'd run Varnish and route different paths through to different things. But the Magento 2 has a migration tool to help you migrate your stuff into Magento 2. And then you can also manage your sessions in basically one Redis install. So sessions are shared across between the two platforms.
So you could take many months over the migration process with the two pretty much side by side?
If you wanted to, you could.
Interesting.
I'm not sure I would recommend it,
okay,
but you could. Any more? No? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ciaran.